Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you for tuning into another episode this week. I'm your host, Mitchell Hansen. And this week, on this week's podcast, we're doing something a little different. I do have a guest like we traditionally do, or that we do every week. But this week, I'm joined by Jack Borman of Canis Hoopus. If you're a regular listener of the podcast, you're familiar with Jack. I work alongside him, Leo, and Benny at Canis Hoopus to do Lynx coverage, as well as some other Timberwolves coverage as well. But Jack has been on the podcast a few times. He was on earlier this season, right before the season, I believe it was. One of the first podcasts I did this year. And then he was also on with Leo, who I mentioned, Leo's son from Canis Hoopus. And we did kind of a preseason roundtable. But on this week's podcast, I'm joined by Jack, and we kind of dive into everything Lynx related up to this point in the season. When we recorded the podcast, it was just after the All-Star break. It was in between the first two games right out of the All-Star break. So we kind of talked about the Lynx, earlier in the season, kind of how the season has gone, where the Lynx are kind of at the All-Star break or at the midway point. Now they're a little bit beyond that. But we talked a little bit about that, some of the expectations that maybe went into the season, how they're playing out halfway through a year, and then we kind of dive into the roster. We kind of dive into performers, how people have done, how the Lynx have done in general, how they've improved, how they've maybe taken a step back, and then we take a look at the future. We take a look at not only the rest of the season, but we take a look at the off season ahead, what might happen with Minnesota when they get. Let's say they get into the playoffs, or maybe they're a bottom four team. We kind of break down both scenarios, maybe the possibilities that are out there, maybe the free agent market. Minnesota might dabble into that market. So we kind of dive into everything and kind of take a full scope of the Minnesota Lynx. So it was good to be joined by Jack. He's always great. I love talking basketball with Jack. I do it. I'm lucky to be able to do it quite regularly. So I appreciate Jack for joining. We could have definitely recorded this podcast a little bit longer than what we did, but I appreciate Jack joining, and it was a great conversation. Before we jump into that, I want to mention our Patreon page. If you are able to, you get early access to podcasts such as this one, other perks like bonus content, other news information. You get newsletters more regularly, which has special content within those that nobody else gets. And then you also get some other perks. You get all the information that I know. I send it along to my patrons, and I try and give them discounts. I try and give them exclusive perks and more. So if you're able to, please go check that out. It's patreon.com/hitting the hardwood. Anything you can do is much appreciated. Obviously, I don't do this for the money, but being able to have some added income to be able to ensure the longevity of this, make it even better. That definitely helps with all of that. So I appreciate anything you can do. At least go check out patreon.com/hitting the hardwood. Start a 7-day free trial if you want to test it out, and then if you like it, you can sign up for a membership. So without further ado, let's jump into this week's podcast with Canis Hoopus site manager Jack Borman. Jack, how are you doing, man? Thank you for joining me.
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. A lot of people are familiar with obviously you being on the podcast. I think I've had you on a few times now, at least once. I know that, I've had you on a few times. One is yourself, and then one with Leo as well from Canis Hoopus. But before we jump into things, I usually let my guests do this, and I want to let you do this too. Kind of plug your work and plug your social media handles, anywhere anybody can find your work if you want to plug that information.
Yeah. So people can find me on Twitter at JRBORMAN13. Have all my stuff on there. And obviously all my work is at Canis Hoopus between both Lynx and Wolves coverage. So mostly Lynx stuff for me in the summer, obviously with the Lynx season in full swing. So don't have anything, any big projects cooking right now, just ready to get into second half coverage.
Absolutely. I gotta admit, and I'm not just saying this. It's been a lot of fun being on the Canis team this year, working alongside you and kind of everything that we've been able to plug out or kind of push out and put together. It's been a lot of fun so far. It's only been one half of the year, so there's definitely more to come. And There's one thing for certain with this Lynx team, that there's usually no shortage of storylines to write about. So that's kind of been
One way or
the
the
case
other.
so
Yeah.
far.
Thankfully there's a variety. Unlike last season, it was pretty monotone throughout, unfortunately.
Right. Well, let's on that note, let's kind of jump right into things. We just exited the All-Star break. As we're recording this podcast, the Lynx are in the middle of a kind of a 2-game stretch where they just played Indiana, and they're going to be playing Los Angeles here to round out kind of the week, but not the full entire week, but just the weekday games. It seemed like, Jack, at the beginning of obviously they started 0-6 beginning of the year. They ended up turning things around. It looks like they almost kind of had things figured out, even though they were missing some key players. They started to kind of get their feet underneath them, and then all of a sudden, I mean, you can't really expect to put up a good fight against Las Vegas. Las Vegas is unreal this year, and they're gonna, I think, do that they will do that to a lot of teams they already have. But they hit that 2-game stretch right before the All-Star break where they play Vegas, get blown out. They play Dallas, get blown out even more. Heading into the All-Star break, you think that maybe they kind of have that rest and that break to recoup, and then they didn't get blown out against Atlanta, but it ended up being closer than maybe it was. But that's the first half definitely, was on blowout pace. But just kind of talk about, from your perspective, what you think the how things have been going, or how things are right now, and especially this last 3-game stretch for Minnesota.
Yeah, I think it would have been really easy to write this team off after starting 0-6, just considering, they weren't exactly projected to be, a top half of the league team. I think that the way that they responded to that was really encouraging, and I think speaks a lot to the makeup of the team in terms of the personalities in that locker room, and how well this team has bonded and gotten along, and that's something that this team did not talk about at all last season. So it's not just something where they're kind of blowing smoke. They all genuinely really like each other, and I think that that's really important for a team to be able to put a product out there that's greater than the sum of its parts. And I would say, really for all of June and the early part of July, that was what the Lynx were. They were playing like a team that was greater than the sum of their parts, and a lot of that, also had to do with injuries and the fact that they really stepped up with with Diamond being down, and Tiff being down, and Jess being down, and AP being down as a scorer off the bench. So, and now you're talking about another scores off the bench. You're gonna have Rachel out now too for about a month here coming up. So, I don't really put a whole lot of stock into the Las Vegas game or the Dallas game, to be quite honest with you, because in my opinion, those two teams are like the worst possible matchups for the Lynx in the entire league. Like, I think both of those teams are tougher opponents for the Lynx to play than even like the Liberty. So I'm not really too worried about it. I think that, Atlanta's a really, really talented team, and playing on the road, like, that's a tough game. I don't think that, them losing by 9, or even if it felt like more of a 15-point loss, that's really something that is going to sound off any alarm bells for me. I think that, Cheryl Reeve has been really, really eager to tell everybody that her team hasn't figured it out, that a huge reason why they played so much better in June was because, and this is, true, that the schedule is significantly easier. I think that they did figure some things out on the floor, but just keeping on that schedule point, I mean, you look at what their schedule looks like the rest of this month. It's pretty tough, in that they really only have 2 easy games, I would say, and that, Los Angeles, they should absolutely win that game on Thursday. And they should absolutely beat the Mystics in Minneapolis next Wednesday as well, considering the Mystics don't have Shakira Austin, Ariel Atkins, or Elena Deladon. So, I would say that those are 2 must-win games, considering that they've got to play Vegas, New York, Connecticut twice, and then New York again to start next month. And I think if they want to be able to make the playoffs, they've really got to take advantage of of a lighter schedule in the middle part of August, and then to close the season, they've got 3 really really winnable games to close the season. So yeah, I think it's just going to come down to winning the games that you absolutely can win, and and trying to just put forth the best effort you can against some of the league's elite teams, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, kind of going into the second half of the year, it almost seems like, if you could predict how the second half of the year is going to go, you would think that maybe it'll go like the first half did, where Minnesota starts off slow and then maybe they kind of catch back up or bounce back. Maybe in the middle ground of that stretch, or that latter portion of the year, and then maybe ultimately come up short. Who knows? Whatever the outcome may be, but it seems like, especially like that 10-game stretch that you just mentioned, or even 9-10 games, whatever that is. That's tough. I mean, that is tough, especially for a team that's still trying to figure things out now. And also dealing with some players being out, notably on offense, which with the Lynx, this team is, if it doesn't have offense, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop too many people. So they need that offense to keep them in games. And yeah, I mean, they're in a tough spot. It's just when we think we have this team figured out, they throw a wrench into the whole thing, and we start to kind of second guess again. But that's a sign of a young team. I mean, that's the ups and downs of a young team, and they're still trying to figure it out. I'm surprised that they came out as flat as they did after the All-Star break, just with how they were talking before the All-Star break of, we got to figure this out, we got to come back strong, and then ultimately kind of laying an egg again, like they did the 2 games leading into the All-Star break. But what are your thoughts on what where the Lynx are right now? But going into the season, did you anticipate that they'd kind of be where they're at right now, or did you think it maybe be better or worse than where they're at right now at this point of the year?
I thought that they would be a little bit better, just because I think I had the most generous projection of where they would be. I think I was 20-20, and then you drop 2 wins for as you go down the list. So we had an 18-22 from Benny, 16-24 from you, and then Leo at 14-26. So yeah, I would say for them to be a 500 team, they're a little bit behind that right now, being 9-12. But I think that they've been playing well enough, and if they're going to be able to have now Diamond and Tiffany and Fee, and hopefully get Jess back here real soon, you would think that they'd be able to win 1 or 2 of the games against the WNBA's really elite teams here coming up. Maybe not in Vegas, but potentially in New York or Connecticut. I do think that they'll be able to be a lot more competitive in those types of games if they can get Jess back to go with those 3 players, and continue to get good versions of Kayla McBride. So I would say at this point they probably project to come up a little bit short of the 500 projection that I had for them. But also I didn't anticipate Diamond Miller missing however many games and Jess being out this long. So I still feel pretty decent about that projection, considering that you generally assume that a team is going to be healthy, and it's what you think the team can do at full strength. So but I think what's really encouraging for me is if you kind of go back and look at their schedule here in terms of like the really truly, like, they should probably win this game. They lost to Chicago, they lost to Phoenix early in the year, and then outside of that, the rest of the first half, their only loss against one of those really winnable teams was Indiana at home, that Friday night game, of that celebratory weekend that they had. And so then you look at the other games they had 5 super winnable games right in a row, and they went 5-0. So they went 5-3 in those really winnable games. I think you probably would have liked to see them go 6-2, to feel a little bit better about where they are. But I still think that that's really encouraging, that they're beating teams that they should beat, based on just talent in the roster, and what their group is presently constructed is able to do on both ends of the floor. So I would say, if you get Jess back, hopefully you can improve upon that. If you're going to still be able to beat the Chicago's, Indiana's, Seattle's, of the world, then that'd be a huge help. And then, maybe if you're playing in Atlanta or New York, you're able to steal one of those games, just with having a really solid showing. So I certainly think that the Lynx are in a good spot in terms of being able to make the playoffs. Like the Sparks, the Sky, I don't think either of those two teams are really in a better position. I haven't seen their schedule, so I can't speak to really, like, if you look at like strength of schedule remaining, how much easier or harder those two team schedules are. But when you just think about all the different injuries that the Lynx have had and illnesses that the Lynx have had, and hopefully getting some of those players back, like, are they still going to find a way to be worse than those two teams? Like, I just don't know. But we'll see. You never know.
The good news for the Lynx is, it's happening, with them. You could kind of, you call the 3-game skid or whatever the skid is by the time this podcast airs. You can call that a drop off, but the good news is everybody else that you listed, Chicago, LA. I mean, Indiana has picked up a win here and there, but they're still kind of dropping down. You got Phoenix, Seattle. They're all starting to fall too, and they're falling at the same time as well. So it's not like, Minnesota's going one way, all the other teams are going, shooting up the standings. It's there for the taking, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't know. I mean, like you said, it is a good sign that they're winning the games that they need to win. And there are some top tier talents in the league, as there always is, but that they're playing now and they can't avoid throughout the year. So I agree that, you mentioned with our pregame or our preseason predictions that we had at Canis Hoopus that we were all kind of around the 500 mark or below. They're kind of, like you said, they're probably not on pace for 500, but they could meet a lot of, kind of fall in that range of what we kind of all thought as a team of where they were going to finish. And overall, it's, back to my question, it is what I think a lot of people expected. Everybody expected that it would be, a learning experience to be an up and down year. It's a young team, that happens. I think people kind of had that false hope of when they went 5-0, like, oh, this team's got to figure it out. Cheryl's turning them around, all of that stuff. People ride those waves, and fans kind of ride those waves as you go through winning streaks and losing streaks. But that's the reality of where Minnesota is right now. They're not going to make it far in the playoffs. If they reach the playoffs, I think they're probably going to lose in the first round. But it's about building blocks and kind of building for the future. They know that this team isn't the finished product. So overall, it's not, the season's not over. So I don't want to say it's a success or a failure yet. We're in the middle of the season, so there's still a lot to play out, and it could still be a success even if they don't make the playoffs, just based on how the team's performing, how the development is. Obviously, if people can stay healthy, that's a key thing, which has been a problem with this team all year, as it has been league wide. But we've seen good flashes, and now it's just a matter of continuing to build on those, and we'll see what happens. If Diamond can stay healthy, I think that's a huge success. Just to kind of get her consistent playing time and get her feet wet in this league, and to kind of build up that consistency for her. So that, I think that's probably the A topic, or the top thing that they need to do. But
and I think that you won't really be able to determine this season a success or a failure until we see what happens, what the roster looks like heading into next season. And that what I mean by that is that I think the Lynx are in a pretty unique win-win position right now, in that, I don't think it is a secret that the Lynx would like to be able to a star point guard. And I don't think that it is a secret that Caitlin Clark has been to multiple Lynx games this season. Paige Beckers has been to a Lynx game this season. I would imagine that both would be enthused by the idea of being able to play for the Lynx, considering that, it's both of those players. That's like the team that where they grew up. That was like the WNBA team for those respective markets. So if you walk away with either one of those two players, and you showed success, or you showed, good development from Diamond Miller. Fee obviously took this huge next step. Kayla McBride had another really solid season. Dorka Juhas, played a lot better than what a lot of people may have anticipated her to play. And then you could also think about bringing in somebody like Maya Hirsch next season or the season after that. So let's say you get one of those two players, or you go look at the free agent market and you're able to play well enough, you make the playoffs, you overachieve in a sense of where, a lot of people predicted that you'd be early in the season. And then you're able to use that argument of like, hey, look how far we got without having a star point guard. And now, you want to look at bringing in somebody like a Jewel Lloyd, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent next season, or there's plenty of other star guards available on the market in terms of like Ariel Atkins is around. That's a player that's played with Team USA basketball under Cheryl Reeve. Kalia Copper isn't necessarily a point guard, but is somebody that absolutely could handle some of that ball handling duties if they wanted to run more of the offense through Fee and Jess. And then too, like, you could think about somebody like a Benaja Laney, who also has Team USA experience, or who knows what other guards become available if there's trades or players getting waived or whatever the case may be. And the Lynx are just in a really good position to be able to bring somebody like that into the fold when you consider they have a good mix of veterans and young players with Kayla and Fee, and then Diamond and Dorka, and potentially, if Maya Hirsch does come over, I think it'll probably be another year. I would expect that she's there by 25, but I'm not sure. Haven't really heard much about that topic since the draft. So we'll see. I just think that it's anybody that's like rushing to call this season a success or a failure based on, what the standings look like on the last day of the regular season is a little short-sighted in terms of how they're looking at it.
Yeah. And we've talked about this too in the past that, I'll go back to what you had mentioned about, let's say the Lynx succeed and they make the playoffs. A lot of people will say, what are they doing? They're wasting the chance to, get maybe one of those two, if they come out this year, one of those two, top players, Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers. It's like, okay, let's break this down. If one of those two or both of them, or let's say neither, either scenario, if they do or don't enter the draft, let's say Minnesota makes the playoffs and they get the 8th seed. Well, that's still the 5th spot in the draft. Like that's still a good pick regardless. I mean, you think about, they make the playoffs, a lot of the team develops well, and then they get, let's say, the 5th pick, and then they do get a free agent or two. That's still a really good scenario, and that's not a bad thing. And that's something that's probably going to be more of a quicker turnaround than getting, Paige Beckers or Caitlin Clark. Now, don't get me wrong, it'd be great to have one of those. Those are probably generational talents that'll be great WNBA players, but you can't wait and bank on them coming and waste another season and waste the talent that you do have, because you got to keep going and you got to keep building up, and you can't just wait for what ifs. And that's one thing I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting, or when they're talking about the tank for Paige or tank for Caitlin Clark. It's like, okay, well, is Nafisa Collier, let's say you wait 2 years because you're going to try and get Caitlin Clark or Paige Beckers. Let's say they don't come out this year, they're going to come out the year after. Is Fee going to be there by the time they come in? Is Fee going to be like, I'm going to stay here when I can go play in, I don't know, let's say Washington is in a situation where they're win now and she wants to go play in Washington because they can win now and she wants to win a title. Well, then what happens? Then you're back at ground zero. So it's a tricky line you got to play there, or toe.
And keep in mind too, I hope everybody out there knows that Nafisa Collier took a pay cut so that she could try to help the Lynx recruit, and that they would have more money to try to play with in terms of being able to get a star. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think that was like an all-in, like, this past offseason we need to get a star, like that's the reason I'm taking this pay cut. I mean, I mean, obviously the Lynx and everybody on that, basketball operations side of the house, they know every single player when they're a free agent, and have a free agent board for every single year, probably for the next 3 or 4 years, of like, here's who we'd love to get, and have gone through it with fee and the whole 9 yards. So but I really think that this upcoming offseason is when, like, they've got to push some chips in the middle. Like, I sat here before the season started and credited the Lynx for not doing what they did 3 years ago, when they used all of the cap space that they had available to them on long-term protected contracts with K-Mac, Natalie Achanwa, and Aerial Powers, and protected all 3 years of each of those contracts. Like, I don't think that history will look back favorably on the totality of those three contracts. And so I gave the Lynx a lot of credit for not doing the same thing this year and feeling like they have to hamstring themselves by spending all that cap space and making them protected contracts, and just filling up their books. Like, nothing came to them that was they thought was better for the development of the team in the interim and the long term than Tiffany Mitchell. And I think that objectively has been a really, really good signing for the Lynx in terms of how they want to play and what Tiff's been able to do and how she fits with the existing players in this core. And I think that they've positioned themselves really nicely to have an infrastructure to bring another star into, to try and take some of that scoring burden and just general creation burden for whether it be for herself or for others off of Napisa Collier. And I think this offseason is going to be a now or never thing for the Lynx. And the good news is that even if they do get Caitlin or Paige in the draft somehow, or they get another top 4 or 5 pick, whatever it is, they can still draft one of those players and bring in another star. Hell, if they wanted to, I think they could bring in 2 stars just in terms of the cap space that they have. I believe the Lynx have the second most cap space of any team in the league next offseason. I could be wrong on that. I'm double checking. Yeah, they have the second most behind the Liberty, but like, when you look at the Liberty and who their free agents are, like, they're going to be bringing back Brianna Stewart, who will be a free agent. They're going to be bringing back Jonquel Jones, who will be a free agent. So really, I think, I mean, in terms of just like functional cap space, like, the Lynx will have the most cap space of any team in the league. They've got arguably the best, second best facilities, however you want to rank them, in Vegas. I mean, the Cheryl Reeve USAB connection is very real. So it'll be really interesting to see how that happens. But I think a lot of that will be determined by the work that they're able to do in the second half of the season, and whether they're able to build on some of that momentum that they kind of started to stack up before that, 2-game skid before the All-Star break. So it's just going to be like, do they show enough the second half of the season to be able to attract 1 or 2 stars to come and play with this team? And in my opinion, if they're able to replicate a similar performance to the really how they played for the majority of June and July, I think that answer will be yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that maybe comparing last offseason to maybe what they think, or kind of where we're at right now, I think a lot has changed in the overall plan of the Lynx. And, I think we talk about, the players they chose out of training camp. I think that they came into training camp thinking that, they had a pretty good idea of who they were maybe going to carry into the season. And I think a couple of the players they cut were players that they thought were going to be with the team at the beginning of the season. And I think a lot's changed already, and I think a lot will change before the next off season. And it will be key to see how players develop, B, how players continue to perform throughout this year, because even the existing players that are on the roster, maybe the veterans, if they're not performing well, that changes their stance to next year. And then the other side of things too is when everybody was dishing out money this offseason, Minnesota, as you mentioned, they signed Tiffany Mitchell, but they stayed relatively quiet. And there was a reason for that, because they know that now when the next offseason rolls around, they're going to be the people that are ready to spend that money. Kind of like what they were when they signed Natalie Chanwa, Aerial Powers and Kayla McBride that offseason. They put themselves in that position. They knew that they would be in a spot to spend some money. And I think that it'll be something similar to this offseason. Now they'll probably have a better pick too. So that's, That's interesting. And they could, let's say they don't have a player, let's say Paige and Caitlin aren't going to be in this year's draft, and they don't think that they have a player at 5, 6, 7, whatever their position might be. They don't have a player there that they want to draft. They can trade it for, let's say, a player, or they can trade it for an asset. They can trade it back for the next year, which I don't know if a lot of people are going to trade if Caitlin and Paige don't come out this year. If they're not going to trade for a pick next year, but it's they have options, and that's a good position to be in for a rebuilding team, and a team that is pretty open to adding pieces around Diamond, Dorka, and Fee. And you could maybe throw Kayla McBride into that mix too, but they have options, and that's, like, to your point, that was strategically done, and that's something that they're already looking forward to, although they do want to continue to focus on this year and how they can develop the players and see fully what they have, because you got to start there before you can build from the ground up. When it comes to let's go back to our preseason predictions. One thing that we already touched on, the where they would stand in the standings or maybe their overall record. The best offseason addition, I think, is interesting, because that we all kind of hit that on the head there. Two of us said Dorka Juhas, and the other two said Tiffany Mitchell. I think that those two have been great. I mean, I think Dorka's been better than what the Lynx would have hoped, stepping in for Jess Shepard, and kind of, she hasn't wowed us with her offensive production, but she's done everything else. She's done a lot what Jess Shepard does, and not being the flashy player, but doing all the little things and doing what the team needs. And I think she's been great, and she hasn't looked like a rookie. She's looked like she's been in the league for a couple years, which is I think really, really important thing, maybe more so than her actual production. And then you look at Tiffany Mitchell. I mean, she's been, with the exception of being injured and being out, she's been great in filling in roles. I think they're still trying to figure out where she fits and what role she should play in. Throwing her at point guard, I think they realized that maybe didn't work out as well as they had hoped. And Lindsay Allen's play has helped with that, in kind of switching Tiffany Mitchell back to maybe her more natural position. But both of those players have been great, and I think coming into the season exactly what Minnesota hoped they would be, and maybe even a little bit more than what they hoped they would be. What do you think on those two additions?
Yeah, I think, especially for Tiffany Mitchell, I just thought that the team lacked really a consistent ability across the board to get in the paint. And Tiffany Mitchell has done an excellent job of being able to get into the paint and get to the free throw line, kind of use that baseline as a way of being able to kick the ball out to the corner and kind of get the ball moving around the perimeter, and into somebody that has been able to run the offense for stretches. Like I wrote, I think it was during the preseason, that I thought that Tiffany Mitchell should get a look at starting point guard, and she did, and I thought she was pretty successful, and an important part of them starting to find some of that offensive rhythm. And then when she started to struggle a little bit, Lindsay Allen came in and did a fantastic job, allowing Tiff to get back to that two guard a little bit, but then she got hurt right away. So, I just think that it's been a rock solid addition, and that she's done a lot of good to, be able to alleviate some of that pressure on Nafisa Collier in terms of getting into the paint, and same with Diamond Miller. So I think, the more that we get to see those three players on the floor together, the more that we'll see Tiffany Mitchell be able to impact the game, just because she won't be as much of a focal point for the defense, which I think will be important. And then just with Dorka Juhas, I mean, sure, Reeve has talked at length about the maturity that Dorka has shown as a professional, and just the way that she's been able to learn very quickly and roll with the punches, and not get too down on herself or freak out in terms of, I'm setting these standards for myself, and if I'm not upholding myself to these standards every single time I'm on the floor, I'm gonna freak out and not trust myself or not be confident. She's just been so even keeled, and never too high, never too low, but in a good way, in a way that really fosters development. And if you looked at a low range and a high range of outcomes, for what her rookie season could be, I think that this would be damn near the top of highest outcomes. I think her rim protection and the way that she's stayed down on pump fakes and the way that she's been able to guard the likes of Neko Gumake and Brittany Griner and Asia Wilson, being able to, deal with a lot of the really quick or really tall players that are in the league today that really just cause all sorts of problems down in the low block and in the mid range. She's done a phenomenal job for someone with her skills at her age and her experience. So the way that she's been able to impact the game has been awesome. And really the two of them together, I don't think there's a wrong answer in terms of how you want to go about that one.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, you look at those two additions. We're not even talking about Diamond Miller yet. I mean, and now, like you said earlier, she hasn't been fully healthy. She's been very inconsistent. But she's still the number 2 pick, and she looks pretty dang good when she's on. And pairing those two additions with her and what could come, it's and you have, and we'll talk about her in just a second. Then you have Fee playing unbelievable, and at in her 5th year, and you could argue that it's probably her 4th year because she only played 4 games last year, but in her 5th year, and
she would tell you it's her 4th year.
Yeah, that's what she said earlier in the year too. She's like, I don't really consider last year a year, but I guess.
And she should. She's exactly right.
Right. Yeah, but I guess let's jump right into Fee. I mean, a lot of people, I mean myself included, I predicted before the year in our piece at Canis Hoopus that I thought she would be at one point in the MVP conversation. I didn't think she'd be in the MVP conversation before the All-Star break. I didn't think she would be playing this well. But she's deserved to be in that conversation. She's, a lot of people I thought she would, expected her to bounce back and have a good year. I don't know if a lot of people thought she would have this good of a year, and she's playing unbelievable right now. I mean, she just got a career high 35 points. It seems like she's getting at least 20, 25, 30 points a night. She ranks top 5 in the league in scoring, and she's doing all the little things of rebounding. She's very active defensively on the, with, protecting the paint, with blocks and steals. And she's just such an overall talent that it's been incredible to watch so far. And we're only halfway through the year. I guess what, when it comes to the type of season that we've seen from her, is it better than what you think, or what you thought expected, coming into the year, or how do you wrap your head around what we've seen from Fee so far?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me has just been the mindset change. And the way that I've seen Fee in her first 3 seasons has really just been as like one of the league's elite connectors, in that she fills so many gaps on both ends of the floor and kind of brings everybody together with the way that she plays and helps a team play more connected basketball. And so inherently she makes everybody around her better because she's doing all the little things on defense. She's somebody that rarely takes bad shots on offense and is always going to make the extra pass to help get a teammate open or create scramble situations that the team can attack, or the way that she cuts, even if she doesn't get the ball, can create better spacing for the offense. So it's like things like that even when she's not scoring, she's really making a difference. And she just wasn't really that aggressive of a scorer, frankly. Like, I think she would probably admit that she wasn't as aggressive as she needed to be, especially 2 seasons ago. And when you have somebody like Syl, as dominant as Syl is, like, it totally makes sense that she wasn't as aggressive as she needed to be, because you want to play through such a physical mismatch that you have. But this season, the way that she started this season, she didn't have a great first few games of the year. And I would assume that's the reason why she wasn't named an all-star starter. Just because I think ultimately, like, if you don't come out of the gates red hot, like, it's really hard to kind of I don't want to say like overturn that narrative, but like really like, push back against it. And she definitely pushed back against it in a major way. It's just that it didn't happen maybe soon enough for some of those things to come to fruition. But like, if you look at the way that she started the season and how Cheryl was like, we need Napheesa Collier. We needed to be clear every night that Napheesa Collier is our best player, and that pretty much that flip just got switched when you're looking at Fee and her game logs. I mean, if you want to look at like her first few games of the season, she had 17, 28, and 21 points in her first 4 games of the season, then followed it up with 17 and a loss at Dallas. And then after that, the next really all of June, her worst game was 17 points on 5 of 10 shooting, and then 18 points on 6-15. Every other game, she had at least 21 points, and in all but one more of those games. So in all but 3 games in June, she had at least 24 points. Just crazy the way that she just flipped a switch and just became an absolute dynamite scorer. And the best part about, all of these scoring, nights is that like almost every single one of them, she's above 50% shooting. And that's even with having a bunch of nights where her 3-point shooting is 1 of 5, 1 of 4, 1 of 4, 1 of 4. Like the way that she's been so efficient inside of the arc has been awesome. And I mean, it makes total sense when you consider how good her footwork is and that her mid-range shooting has always been rock solid. Now, I mean, her 3-pointer hasn't even gotten her to the point where like it's consistent for her and that she's able to use it as a scoring tool. I think, defense is respected a little more, but where she's really been dominant has been inside the arc. Mm-hmm. And so I think if she can get to a point where she can also be dominant outside the arc, hopefully that comes next season. Whereas now I think she's just kind of getting back closer to that like average from beyond the arc space. It's just going to be over for teams, frankly. Like it's already somewhat over for teams trying to guard her right now, because it seems really to me like the only nights where she hasn't scored very well is when she's just been tired from literally dragging the team on her back for 40 minutes at a time. Which is just really difficult to deal with. So yeah, I mean, that's just the way that I'd characterize it, is like, it's just been spectacular to see from her mindset switching from like this super connective piece, make everybody around me better, to I'm going to make everybody around me better because I'm attracting 3 and 4 defenders every single time I touch the ball. And even though that's what's happening, I'm still going to find a way to score 25 a night or whatever she's been averaging. I think it's up to like 22 a night now, which I want to say is third in the WNBA.
21.9 through the July 20th or the July 18th game.
So she's third, right behind Breanna Stewart. Like if you would have told me at the start of the season that Napheesa Collier would have been third in scoring, I probably would not have believed you. But that ascension that she's taken to really be like a legit superstar, one of the 7 best players in the league, 7, 10, whatever rank. I don't really care that much about rankings, but like one of the truly, like when you think of elite players, like you can't leave Napheesa Collier off that list type of players, is huge. And then you also look at Diamond Miller, and it's like you feel like you've got your 1-2 or your 1-3 set for a long time on the wing, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I want to mention about Fee that people forget about Fee is Fee's one of the best defensive players in the league. Mm-hmm. And you look at her backside rim protection has been absolutely fantastic. She calls out, what they're doing, make sure people are in the right spots. I mean, she's had a game with 3 blocks, 6 blocks, 4 blocks. She's had games with 3 steals, 4 steals, multiple times. So she's just been everywhere on both ends of the floor. And, I know that we're biased on some level, but like, I don't know that there's another player in the league. Maybe Alyssa Thomas is like the only one that I would like feel pretty good about saying this about, that's like more valuable than Fee. But like, if you took her off the team, the Lynx, I think I could pretty confidently say the Lynx would have 0 wins if mm-hmm. Napheesa Collier, maybe 1 win if Napheesa Collier was not playing.
Yeah.
And I don't know what other players you could say that about. Like I said, Alyssa Thomas maybe, but other than that, or Jewel Lloyd, definitely Jewel Lloyd for sure is also in that conversation. But
I
crazy.
So by the time this podcast comes out, I'll have a piece out about Napheesa Collier, and I make the case for her being in the MVP conversation. And one thing that I looked at initially was the first 20 games. How is she doing in wins versus losses? And how does that differentiate? That was the first thing I kind of thought of to look up. And I'll have this included in that piece as well. But when the Lynx win in the nine, so over the first 20 games leading up to the All-Star break, the Lynx were 9-11. In those 9 wins, it's complete flip from the 11 losses. In the 9 wins, she's averaging 24 points, 9.4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, about 1.5 blocks, shooting 50.5%, and her plus minus is 7.2, plus 7.2. In those losses, she's averaging 5 points less, so it's 19 points. She's averaging 6.3 rebounds. That's 3.1 rebounds less. She's averaging just under an assist less a game at 2.2 in those losses. 1.4 steals, which is half a steal less. In just under a block a game, and is shooting 46%. In the plus minus in losses, minus 11.1. In that, there's multiple factors for that. It's not just, there's a lot that happens in those losses. Maybe Fee is not playing as much because maybe it's a blowout. A lot can play into effect or kind of go into effect with those stats. But that to me that's interesting. I mean, I compared her to, just out of curiosity, just to see like what Nneka Ogwumike is doing right now, because I view those two situations very similar, with Nneka carrying the team every night and Fee trying to carry the team every night while dealing with injuries, while dealing with a young team, whatever it may be. And they're basically the same. Fees is probably almost a little bit better. So it's like, people are talking about Nneka Ogwumike in the MVP conversation. Why isn't Fee right there with her if she's having a better year and she's more important? Isn't that what the award is, most valuable player? So it's interesting that people are recognizing her, but she's still not getting that recognition league wide. And I think part of it is because Minnesota's not doing well. And that's, that's part of it as well. You get the recognition when your team's doing well and your people are watching you more.
And the other part of it is like Nneka has been doing it forever.
Right.
Whereas like Nneka is going to come to mind. Like I should have said Nneka too, like Jewel and AT and Nneka.
Mm-hmm.
But like this is the year that Fee is really broken out and the team isn't doing all that well. So I think it's like that's the combination where Fee isn't like this legacy superstar like Nneka has been, where Nneka's brilliance is that she's done it for so many years, and that like their teams have not been good for like the last 3 or 4 years, and she's still just been doing the damn thing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with Fee is like I hope that people now, like even if the Lynx aren't doing well, that the Lynx are like, okay, damn, like Nafisa Collier really is like one of the preeminent players in the league. And I think you looked at it really well. Like, a lot of people wanted to say like, oh, look at Satu. And Satu definitely, like, I think was rebounding better than Fee, but like Fee was scoring more efficiently than Satu was. And is a much better defender than Satu is as well. And Dallas already had an all-star starter in Enrique Iguodala. And so I think that part of like the allure of that team, they're doing well, brings on that type of thing. And I just think it's like, I just challenge people to look deeper than the rank or the standings to try to find, who these types of players are. But, we'll see.
Yeah. I guess kind of to wrap things up, or to kind of put a bow on things, in comparing our preseason expectations and kind of where we're at right now, do you think it's kind of, the predictions that you did make, let's say maybe let's keep it team centric, the records that we did outline, do you think that they finish around that mark, below that mark, above that mark? How do you think that the year rounds out?
I think that they do finish a little bit under what my projection was, just because their schedule is a little bit more difficult here. So yeah, I think that's where we'll land. So I don't know. I'd say that I think they're going to make the playoffs. I feel pretty confident about that portion of my prediction. I just don't think they're going to be 20-20. I think they'll probably finish 4 or 5 games below 500. So that 18-22, 17-23 range. So something like that. I mean, I also feel pretty good about my bold predictions section, which was that Jess Shepard was going to lead the team in assists. And obviously she's been out, but if you just want to look at like assists per game, she's still number one. She's tied with Lindsay Allen for number one on the team. So I feel good about that. My other ones, I said my biggest surprise this season was going to be Dorka Juhas, so I feel great about that. Just for the sake of picking a player that wasn't Nafisa Collier, I chose Tiffany Mitchell as leading scorer. So obviously that one's not going great, but otherwise, like I feel pretty good about where we're at with this. And you nailed yours with Phoebe and the MVP conversation. So it's been fun to see these unfold for sure.
Yeah, it's always fun to whether it's even just record predictions or whatever predictions it may be, just to go back at the end of the year and be like, okay, we're completely wrong. I don't know what I was thinking at the beginning of the year, but it'll be interesting to see it play out and how that all shakes out and how they finish up in the standings and which Canis Hoopus writer gets a free beer because of winning those predictions. Just kidding, we don't have that on the line. We should have, but we didn't. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And I think, just long story short, just to kind of wrap things up for fans listening, that I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'll say it for the rest of the year. This team is young. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. It's not, even if they make the playoffs, it's, this isn't a team of, the Lynx past. Like it's not, they're not going to make a run this year, and that's okay. But it's not the end of the world if they don't get the number one pick, because who knows if Caitlin Clark or Paige Beckers are even going to come out in Minnesota. They're in a win-win situation, I think, this year with where they're at, and regardless of how the year shakes out. So I know fans don't want to hear it. I know people don't want to hear it, but just as I don't like them, but as Aaron Rodgers once said, RELAX, and everything will be all right. But Jack, thank you for joining. It's, as always, it's a blast to chat with you. And for anybody looking to find Jack, you can follow him. He mentioned at the beginning of this recording that follow him on Twitter. Check out our work at canishoopus.com. You can follow both of us on, like I said, on Twitter to catch our ramblings and nonsense and back and forth banter that we often do. So make sure to check us out and check out canishoopus.com. Check out Leo's work, Benny's work, everybody else. Check out the Timberwolves work that's over there, as well as the Lynx stuff. A lot of good work going there, and it'll continue, the rest of the year and throughout the year. So, Jack, thanks again for joining. I appreciate it. And maybe at the end of the year, we'll have to do this again just to wrap things up and to go over maybe how right or how wrong we were on everything.
Absolutely, man. Always a blast. I appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Jack. Thanks again to Jack for joining. Like I said before the podcast ran, before the sit down with Jack began, that it's always great talking basketball with Jack. He's a great guy. He's very knowledgeable. He's probably one of the smartest basketball minds that I've gotten to work alongside, and it's been a lot of fun to be able to join him at Canis Hoopus. Get kind of closer to him as a friend and as kind of a colleague in covering this team and covering this league. So Jack is great. He's one of the nicest guys you can meet. So go check out Jack on Twitter, on social media. Check him out at Canis Hoopus. Read a lot of his work. He's very talented, and like I said, I'm lucky to work alongside him. So another thing I want to point out is or kind of mention is our sponsors, our partners that we have at Hitting the Hardwood. Really appreciative for all that they do. If you know anybody, or maybe you are interested in kind of teaming up with Hitting the Hardwood, email us at hittingthehardwood@gmail.com. I'm happy to chat about things, whether it's plugging you on this podcast, making you a sponsor of really anything else. Feel free to chat with us, and willing to look into that further and help you out as well as helping out Hitting the Hardwood. But the two partners that we do have right now that I'm really happy to partner with all season long, Homage and Better Edge. I was going to spell out Better Edge, but I'll get to that in a second. But let's start with Homage. They have a lot of really cool vintage clothing. They have really cool vintage gear. WNBA, any sport you can think of. They have basic team logos. They have T-shirts, sweatshirts, whatever you want. They have there. And I'm the proud owner of a few different clothing items, and it's really really quite comfortable, and I really like all the stuff that they offer there. So please go check them out, HOMAGE.com. And then I'll get to Better Edge, betteredge.com, BETTOR edge.com. A lot of stuff on that site is, you can obviously bet against people. You can bet on sports. You can bet on the WNBA, bet on the Lynx, whatever you want to do. I enjoy it all the time, or I use it all the time, and I enjoy it a lot. You can basically go on there. You can compete against others. You can bet by yourself. You can, in the competitions that I regularly start up, it's pick 'em. So you can pick, teams straight up. You can pick against the spread, the money line, over under, whatever you want to do. You can compete against people. You can just do it by yourself if you want. The competitions, I do run a few of those throughout the year. Or actually, I try and do them quite regularly. But you can come compete against me. It's only $1 to play in the league. You can bet against me. You can bet against whoever else. Take my money. I always say that on this podcast. You come take my money because your odds are you will take my money. So come do that. And if you are a first-time user, go to betteredge.com/links and use the promo code LYNX. That's LYNX. And when you do that, you get $20 in free play right away. So at least go check that out and try it out. I know once you try it, you'll love it. So please go check them out, betteredge.com, BETTOR edge.com. One last thing I want to mention is our Hitting the Hardware store, Hitting the Hardwood website. You can go check out all of that on our social medias. Hitting the Hardwood store, you can get a lot of cool Hitting the Hardwood gear. It's all Lynx colors, so blue and that royal blue, that dark blue, or white or gray. There's some sweatpants on there, joggers that are gray. We have anything from tank tops, sweatshirts, long sleeves, t-shirts, sweatpants, like I said, hats, phone cases, stickers, magnets, pint glasses, mugs, whatever you can think of, we got on that store. So please go check that out. And you can, like I said, you can find that on our social medias at Hitting Hardwood on Twitter or Hitting the Hardwood on Facebook and Instagram. But please go check that out. And like I said, with our patrons, I mentioned our patrons, some of the perks that they get is they get a discount. So they get a 25% discount just for being a patron through the Hitting the Hardwood store. So that's another perk that gets offered through our Patreon page. To wrap things up, I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening to the podcast. Not only this podcast, but every week. I really appreciate your support, and I look forward to continuing to record the podcast, to offer this to everybody that's interested, and then to have some guests, some interesting guests. If you ever have anybody that you think you'd like to hear on the podcast, anything about the store, any questions about Hitting the Hardwood, whatever it may be, please email, like I said, hittingthehardwood@gmail.com. Reach out to us on Twitter, any Facebook, Instagram, any social medias. Reach out to us and let us know. So thank you again for listening, and I will see you next week.